So welcome to Ambedkar Media, and today we are going to bring to you a very eminent personality of our community, Dr. G G Rajvardhanan, who is an oncologist surgeon by profession. What we can say, he's a cancer specialist and a surgeon, and he operates his own hospital in Tamil Nadu, and he has a very amazing social career. He has been working with the community, with the students, with the activists for a long time, and he is also the founder president of what is now known as MMT, the Mass Movement Trust, which is based in Tamil Nadu, and it has a huge mass base in Tamil Nadu. Also, Dr. Vardhanan is a member of the Tamil Nadu State Minority Commission, where he's a Buddhist member there, and he advocates the interest of the community, Buddhist community, particularly in Tamil Nadu. His scope of work is also extended a lot throughout India. He is the General Secretary of Secretary General of what is now known as IADF, International Ambedkarite Doctors Federation, and he is having a very engaged life, as we can see and we can say. He is very much interested in Baba Sahib's mission, particularly how Buddhism offers a scope for total revolution for the community. And he is going to present us his ideas, his views, and his thoughts on the Buddhist movement today. So I welcome Dr. Rajvardhanan. He's a very good friend of mine, and I request him to please begin his presentation. Sir.
JB Namo Buddhaya. Thank you, Mangesh, and I thank Ambedkar Caravan for giving me this opportunity. And I view this opportunity as sharing my experience, like how the book Path to Salvation by Baba Sahib Dr. Ambedkar has actually enlightened many of us, doctors in particular. So this is going to be my experience, and I'm going to address on this topic that is given today. And Mangesh has given me this topic, Buddhism as a path to liberation. And when we look at this topic, path to liberation, and what are we going to liberate from? And the huge problem that affects India is the caste-based inequality. So how do we look at this problem from the perspective of Buddhism? That is going to be my topic. This liberation from the point of Buddhism. Dr. Ambedkar in 1936 mentioned that turn in any direction in life, caste is a monster that crosses your path. You cannot have political reform, you cannot have economic reform unless you kill this monster. So caste is the biggest problem in India even today. And it is unfortunate to see that even more than 70 years since he said this in 1936, still we face caste as a huge problem wherever we look around. This is the scenario. And unless we address this caste-based inequality in India, we cannot expect this nation to grow. Because how can you expect all the citizens of a country to have the pride and the vigorous intention to improve the country if they are not being treated as equal citizens as of everyone else? So that is the important issue, because if anybody is interested in developing the nation, want to make this country or India as a powerful nation, you must address this problem. And unless you address this, you cannot expect the nation to grow. So that is why I've chosen this topic. And unfortunately, even today, we see, just close your eyes and keep your mind open and just imagine, are we not having caste around in India? So anybody with a true conscience will realize that we are living amidst caste right from birth to death. And this is an image that I got in the internet. This is from a state which says proudly how it has cleaned and renovated the burial ground in their state. It is actually a proud display of how this burial ground has been renovated. But when we see, of course, we can see before after pictures, and the burial ground was in such a bad condition, and it has got a very new, fresh outlook. But this is really a proud thing to see, because even after so many years, this picture clearly says that there is a separate burial ground for SC Hindu and for the Hindu. So that means there is a separation for the scheduled caste people, even in their own religion. Then how can we talk about equality? So even in death, even after death, people do suffer. And that is why it is important to talk about castes today. And who should talk about this? This is another question. And majority of the people think that it is up to the people who are affected with untouchability. It is their responsibility to talk about it. And some people think that it is the duty of those people who have been benefited with reservation to talk about it and to think about it. For the people who have been affected with caste discrimination, the untouchability, their aim for fighting against the caste, the untouchability problem, is to save at least their children from the problems that they faced. And what about the persons who have been benefited by reservation? By reservation, I don't mean only the scheduled caste reservation. I also mean the reservation that is being used by the backward communities, BC, MBC, OBC, also. So reservation in any form. Whenever you have the benefit of reservation, then it is your duty to talk about the caste-based discrimination so that your community, because reservation, I see that as a weapon. It is a weapon given by that community to its representative so that he can empower himself, become strong enough in the society to represent them, and then go and fight for the equality of that community. That is what is reservation. Reservation is actually a representation. It is a weapon. So when we are going for a war, the weapon is actually given to a person who is able to use it, who has the power and who has the skill. Similarly, a person from the depressed class community is being selected on basis of reservation. He is being given that weapon so that he goes and fights in the community for equality. And there's another way of looking at reservation also. Reservation is a right. I can use this illustration. You can see this picture in a circular path where there is going to be a running race. The person who's standing in the innermost ring, he stands right at the back. And the person who's standing in the outermost ring, he stands so many meters ahead. But this is not something unusual, because we can't say, oh, this is not fair. How can you say that one in the same race, one person is standing right in front and one person is standing right at the back? But when you apply this scientifically, you see, because the outermost ring person has to run a longer distance, naturally, that extra distance has to be calculated and he has to be given that lead. Similarly, reservation is also a right. It is a scientific way of representing the community which was in the outermost rim of the society for more than 2000 years. So unless you give them that lead, there cannot be a fair competition. So this is actually the scientific way of improving the society. That is what is reservation. So it is a right. And whenever you have a weapon, that means you have the power. And with great power goes great responsibility too. So it is the responsibility of the people who have been benefited with the reservation to talk about castes. And of course, if you talk about rights, then automatically you also get the duty, because if you enjoy a right, then you have the duty. So it is not only the duty of the person who has been affected with caste, not only the duty of the person who has been benefited by caste in the form of reservation, but it is the duty of every citizen of India to fight against this caste, because then only the country will improve. So it is the duty of an Indian citizen. As an Indian citizen, even if you are affected or benefited, then it is your duty to raise your voice against the atrocities on fellow human beings, because the National Human Rights Commission report says that a crime was committed against a Dalit every 18 minutes in India. And every day, 3 Dalit women are raped. That is something serious. It is going on there on our own fellow human beings. And how can we live in this society when our own fellow human beings are suffering? So is it not our duty to raise our voice, to think about it, to find a solution so that the country grows? So that is my intention. And as a doctor, I feel I have to approach this problem of caste as we approach a disease, because as Baba Sahib Dr. Ambedkar says, caste is a disease of the mind. So when we approach diseases, we generally follow these principles of Buddha. See, these are the 4 cardinal principles of Buddha, which all of you will be aware. There is suffering. That means there's a problem. You can apply this formula for any of our problems and it works really. So there is a problem. And always when you understand that problem, you look for the cause for the problem. And once you find the cause, the solution becomes very easy. And once you apply the solution, the problem comes to an end. These are the 4 cardinal principles. And this is what exactly we are doing in medical practice also. So once a patient walks in, we find out what he is suffering with. And then we find the cause. See, suppose, for example, a person comes with a stomach ache. I can give him a tablet for stomach ache, but that is not enough because that will only control the symptom. But unless I find the cause for a stomach ache, I cannot cure that problem. So first we'll have to understand the problem. Then we go about looking for the cause of the problem. And then we find the treatment and we prescribe the treatment. Then the patient has to take the treatment, then only he gets cured of the disease. So this is the basic formula that we use. And I use the same problem, the formula for addressing the caste problem also. Now, the first question is, we'll have to understand the suffering. There is suffering, there is a problem. What is this problem? This understanding differs with people because we know there is discrimination. This discrimination is based on castes, and these castes are based on religion, and that religion is based on faith on God, so and so on. It goes like this. So unless we narrow down on the problem, we cannot find a specific solution. So now what are we actually facing at? Many of the organizations who started addressing untouchability later on moved to eradication of caste, and then they move on to religions, and then they move on to God. They talk about atheism, and then they conduct international seminars on atheism, and they get diverted. But conducting an international seminar on atheism, how it is going to affect the problem of the untouchables? So that is why is religious belief an actual problem for the untouchables? Baba Sahib Dr. Ambedkar, in his book, The Path to Salvation, says religion is that which knits the people together. He takes this definition from Tilak. In that case, if something which is knitting the people together, then there cannot be any opposition for that. And I put it in another way, if religion is the cause for the caste-based discrimination, then all those countries who have religious belief, they must be having caste-based discrimination. But this is peculiar to India. And it is being taken by the Indians wherever they go, they practice this caste-based discrimination, and that is why this is becoming a problem in UK and US also nowadays. So this is something peculiar, and it is separate from the religion. Then what is this? See, we know it is not a religious belief, it is something different. That means we'll have to look into these two things. It is caste and untouchability. How do they differ with each other? See, I can explain, because many of the people, they get confused between these two, the caste and untouchability. I can explain to you with an illustration. Most of you might have heard about this honor killing of Kausalya Shankar. Kausalya was a girl from a Devar community, and then Shankar was a boy from Dalit community. So they had love marriage, and both the families did not accept. The girl's family opposed it, and finally this boy was killed. What is the reason for this killing? Because it was an intercaste marriage, because there was a caste difference between these two couples. If that is the case, if this killing, honor killing, was based on intercaste marriage, if it was based on caste, then I ask a question. Suppose this boy was from a different community belonging to the backward community. Like, say, for example, Kausalya is a girl from Devar community, and this boy is, say, for example, from any other community like a Mudaliyar community or Reddyar community, some other community which is in the backward district. Would you think that this honor killing would have happened? Even then, they are two different castes, but then honor killings don't happen. This is because it is not just caste, it is caste-based discrimination. So it is something beyond caste, it is not just caste. And we'll have to be very specific and we'll have to address this problem of untouchability as a specific issue. So why I'm so particular about defining this problem itself is because unless you define the exact problem, you cannot be specific. You cannot have a targeted therapy. So this is what we use in our treatment also. If a person comes with a bacterial infection, there are so many bacteria involved, but we have to find out which particular bacteria is causing this problem and which particular antibiotic is going to work against that bacteria. So then only our treatment will be very specific, will be tailored to the individual, and will be 100% successful in getting the cure also. So same thing. So now we have addressed the issue, the problem. The problem is untouchability, and there is no wavering around. So we need not go about whether it is going to be caste or religion or theism versus atheism, God. No confusion. This is purely untouchability, and we are going to focus on that. So I'll come back to this slide. There is suffering, and we have defined that it is untouchability that is affecting the scheduled caste people, which is the cause for their misery. So this is because the problem is untouchability. Now the next question is, what is the cause? Because we have to look at the cause. As I address a patient, once we get to know that he is suffering with a particular symptom, the next question that we ask is, how long? What was the history? When did it start? How did it start? So that is the next question. That is the looking at the cause. So when we start looking at the cause of untouchability, again, a huge confusion comes. Why? Because we have to look at the cause so that the disease gets eradicated, the untouchability gets eradicated. It need not be controlled alone, it has to be eradicated, because just like a disease, we are not aiming to control the symptoms, we are actually trying to cure the disease. Similarly, if you want to cure untouchability, then you'll have to find out the cause. While looking for the cause, people get confused between this cause and effect. I'll tell you what is this cause and effect phenomena, because what is the cause of untouchability? If you ask, people come out with different answers. Some say it is because of unclean jobs. The scheduled caste people are into menial jobs, and that is why they are being looked down upon in the society. Or they are illiterate, that is why they get the second-rate citizens treatment. Or they are with poverty, and unless they improve their economy, they cannot claim equal citizenship. Or they suffer with this inferiority complex, or they are having reservation, that is why they are being discriminated. So these are the reasons that the society has. An individual, the organization, or any particular reformer who addresses this situation is posed with these problems, and naturally he gets diverted into these symptoms. I'll call them as symptoms only, because they are the effects. The person thinks that this is the cause, unclean job, so he goes and tries to change the job of these scheduled caste people so that they improve in the society. Or if a reformer, thinks that it is because of illiteracy, then he goes and concentrates on education. If it is poverty, then he goes and concentrates on the economic development. If he thinks that it is because of the inferiority complex, then he goes and tells them to strike back. Don't be submissive, strike back, or be proud in saying your caste, and then hold your caste up, say that you are from a ruling class, and then fight back. That will be their approach. And some people of late, we are seeing leaders who are talking against reservation, but they are willing to give up reservation for the sake of gaining equality, because they all feel that this is the cause. But there is a difference, because all these are the effects of untouchability. They are not the causes for untouchability. I can explain this in a medical issue itself. Because unless you find the cause, if you understand this difference between cause and effect, we'll be going on fighting against the effect. We'll be going on fighting against symptom alone, and we'll be forgetting about the underlying disease. So I can explain to you in this medical example. This is an illustration. And I have taken Sankhya philosophy. You know, Sankhya philosophy was proposed by Kapila. Kapila was born in Kapila Vastu, that is the place where Buddha was born. And this Kapila was greatly renowned by Buddha himself. A very beautiful philosophy, cause and effect philosophy. So if you say that for a particular effect there is a cause, then they must be closely interrelated. So if you take away the cause, the effect should also vanish. So that is the Sankhya's philosophy. When we apply the Sankhya philosophy into the medical field, I'll take the disease example, tuberculosis. Suppose a patient is suffering with tuberculosis, a person is suffering with tuberculosis in your neighborhood. Why will you say that he is having tuberculosis? Because you will say this particular person is having tuberculosis because he has cough, he has fever, and all the symptoms of tuberculosis like weight loss, he has swellings in the neck, or you can even say that he is taking treatment for tuberculosis. That is why I call him a tuberculosis patient. But all these are symptoms of an underlying disease. But do you think cough is a cause for tuberculosis? It is only a symptom of tuberculosis. Then what is the cause? Cause is the bacterial infection, what we call as Mycobacterium tuberculosis, which is a bacteria. So that is the cause. Because this tuberculosis infection has occurred in this patient, he is suffering with the symptoms, and we are seeing the symptoms. And because of the symptoms, we recognize him as a tuberculosis patient. Similarly, when you look at the disease of the mind, the untouchability, we get these symptoms: unclean jobs, illiteracy, poverty, and reservation. All these are symptoms and the effects. Because he was suffering with untouchability, he has been given reservation. It's like a treatment. And just because he is getting the treatment, we cannot brand him as the cause for the disease. Then what is the underlying cause for this untouchability? Unless we understand that all these problems that the untouchables are facing today, they are all the effects and they are not the causes. And I don't say that these symptoms need not be treated. They have to be treated. Just as I give treatment for tuberculosis, I'll not only give the treatment against the bacteria, I'll also give treatment against these symptoms. Similarly, we have to treat these symptoms also, these effects of the untouchability. We have to educate the scheduled castes. We'll have to give them economic improvement. We'll have to give them the moral support. All that has to be done, but that is necessary, but it is not sufficient. You will have to treat the cause. For that, you must.
The cause can be analyzed by looking into the history. So, even when we look at the patients, when we get the symptom and then after that we want to analyze the cause, then we ask the patient when it started and how it started. That is the history. Similarly, when we want to look at the cause for a particular problem in our society also, we'll have to look into the history of how its origin, how it came into existence by going through the history. And I'm going to get this history as narrated by Babasaheb Dr. Ambedkar in his books. I've gone through the various books written by Dr. Ambedkar, the Shudras, the Untouchables and why they became the Untouchables, the Revolution and Counter-Revolution, Buddha and Dharma, Buddha or Karl Marx, Path to Salvation, and so many of these books. So based on these books, I could get an insight into the exact origin of untouchability, and I'm going to share this experience with you. Now we'll go to the history of untouchability. Human beings evolved 4.5 million years ago, and possibly by the evolution theory. And initially the people were nomads. They were hunters and gatherers. They moved from one place to another in search of food and shelter. Until 10,000 BCE, they were all nomadic tribes. So only in 10,000 BCE, the agriculture was discovered, and after the discovery of agriculture, they started settling down in one place, and that too particularly river beds, because river water was necessary for agriculture. These people settled down in river beds, and then they needed shelters. They made houses, and then houses became forts, and thus civilizations evolved. From nomadic life, man came into civilized life. Thus evolved various civilizations in the history, and among them, uh, the four river valley civilizations are the most important. And the Indus Valley civilization was situated along the river Indus, which was in the northwest portion of India. Along the river Indus, there were various cities like Mohenjo-daro, Harappa, Dholavira, Kalibanga. Like this, so many cities were discovered. All these civilizations had very good building structures, and then there were female goddesses, and notably absent among them were there were no temples, no forts, no palaces, no armories. There were godowns for storage of grains, but there were no godowns for storage of weapons. Thus, the civilizations were established, and along with the civilizations, there were some people who were living in the tribal culture also as nomads. Both coexisted. The civilized people were living in the civilizations along the riverbeds, and the nomadic tribes, they lived in the jungles. Both coexisted. But whenever there is a famine or in terms of need, the tribal people will attack the neighboring civilizations for food and other basic needs. So this used to happen quite frequently. Wherever civilizations existed, the surrounding nomadic tribes were also always a threat to the civilizations. They used to attack and take away the food and other materials during their times of need. Both coexisted. Similarly, in 1500 BCE, there was a famine, and the nomadic tribes who lived in the Central Europe, the Siberians, also called as Aryans, they invaded the adjacent Indus Valley civilization. During this invasion, they had the advantage of horse and iron. Why? Because the animal, the power of horse was unknown to the civilization of Indus Valley. The other thing is the iron. Iron as a metal was not known to the Indus Valley civilization people. So the advantage of the Aryans by using horses and the iron weapons, this gave them a tremendous advantage over the Indus Valley civilization people. This Aryan invasion theory was first proposed by Sir Robert Eric Mortimer Wheeler, who was an archaeologist. He proposed that the Aryans invaded the Indus Valley civilization in 1500 BC. This was later on debated, and many people started refusing it. They claimed that Aryans migrated and it was not an invasion. But recent evidences, the genetic research, has thrown much light on this debate, and now we have very strong evidence and support in favor of Aryan invasion. There was a gene study conducted all over India. They studied two types of genes. Generally, we have nuclear genes, which is the paternal gene from the father side, and we also have mitochondrial gene, which is seen in the cytoplasm. This is the maternal gene. The mitochondrial gene, the advantage is this gene does not undergo mutation. So whenever we want to study the racial origin of a particular human race, we analyze the mitochondrial gene. It is also called as a historical gene because it is not mutated. We get the exact history of how the gene was present right from the beginning. So these two genes were analyzed. More than 10,000 samples were taken from all over India from people of different communities, both males and females. And two striking facts were finally observed. One was the paternal gene found in the upper caste Hindus males in the northwestern part of India did not match with any of the paternal genes present all over India. So that was something unique. And then they analyzed which part of the world has this type of gene, and we could see that the the gene which was present in the upper caste males in the northwestern part of India corresponding to the Indus Valley civilization, it matched with the gene of the Central Europeans. So that gives an evidence that these genes actually traveled from the Central Europe. So that is point number one proved. Now the second question is whether this genetic transition occurred as an invasion or as a migration. This answer can be obtained from the second fact derived from the genetic research, that is based on the mitochondrial gene. The mitochondrial gene, as I told you, it is from the maternal origin. When we analyze the maternal gene all over India, all the maternal mitochondrial genes which were present in both males and females and which were present in all the communities, they were all the same. That means the females belong to the native place itself. So none of the females came from outside. That's what the genetic evidences say. So this actually indirectly gives an answer to this question whether the Aryans came in migration or invasion. Because if they did not bring females along with them, it couldn't have been a migration. Because during migration, generally a population moves along with their females and the children. So it moves as a migrant population. But only during invasion, the male population alone comes. So here, when we see that no female has come from outside and only the male genes have come inside India, that means it is an invasion and it is not a migration. This is what the genetic research says, and we could see this fact being published in the magazine called Nature. There was a study conducted by the University of US and Andhra University anthropologists, and they have clearly shown that the genetic evidence is in favor of Aryan invasion. And quite recently, we got a paper published in The Hindu in 2017 by Tony Joseph, who is a world-renowned genetic research scientist. And he also says that the Aryan transition was an invasion and it was not a migration. So
they had this weapon advantage, but they were not satisfied with this weapon advantage because that is only temporary. They were very intelligent enough to understand that they cannot control this population with weapons alone, because at any time the population is huge. So they can, if they revolt back, then this weapon control alone will not be sufficient. That is when a conspiracy was made, and they wanted to suppress these people altogether. It is not only in weapons. They wanted to suppress them, keep them enslaved. So for that, they made this conspiracy, and in the name of God, they made 4 divisions. The Brahmins, they proclaimed that they were created from the head of the Brahma, the creator, and then the Kshatriyas, the ruling people, and they said that they were created from the shoulders of Brahma. Vaishyas, the trading community, from the thighs, and the Shudras from the foot. And quite obviously, they made it in the name of God so that the people believe. And all this didn't take place within one day or 1 year. This took many years, 1,000 years, for the people to accept this and have a living style which had this very well settled in the society. And this 4 varnas, they call Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, and Shudra. Here we can see that the Brahmin is the superior most, and then comes the Kshatriya, then the Vaishya, and Shudra. And Shudra, you can see it includes all the women. This the women must understand. As for the Hindu Shastras, it is told that women are included in the Shudras only. Why? When we look at the genetic history, it is quite obvious that women did not come from outside. They were all the native people. So naturally, they were categorized, they were grouped along with the native people only. That is why they were grouped under Shudras. And this fact is not understood by women in India. And there are Brahmin women, even they are coming under Shudras only. That they must understand. That is why the temples don't have women as priests, even if they are Brahmin women. Because all women, as per the Hindu Shastras, are Shudras. And it's quite obvious that the above 3 That is, one is controlling the people with knowledge, the other one is controlling the people with weapons, and the other one is controlling the people with wealth. So all the three important things, there is the mental power, the manpower, and money power, is being taken by the twice born group, that is the Aryans who invaded, claiming the birth superiority. They said they are the ruling class. And all the native people who belong to the Indus Valley civilization, they were categorized as Shudras. So this is what happened. And the natives were controlled by weapons, and then the religious belief, the Vedas were introduced, and then Vedic culture was established, which was nothing but merry making, liquor drinking, and sexual abuse of the local women. This continued, as I said, from 1500 BCE to 500 BCE. That means for 1000 years. For 1000 years, this practice continued, and it became a well-established culture. That was the Vedic culture. And after 1000 years of suppression, then finally a period came when the local people started revolting, and this is what we call as the revolution. Two types of revolutions took place. One in the place of Magadha, the present-day Bihar, where the local Naga rulers, they started protesting against this Varna system. And another social revolution happened in Kosala in the form of Buddha. Buddha, right from his childhood, was questioning these Vedic cultural practices like Yaga, Yagna, and then he was questioning on the inequality, and then he was questioning on the war also. The question on war came and during one instance where there was a river sharing dispute. So they lived in the Buddha belonged to the Sakya community, and they lived along the banks of the Rohini River. And the opposite side of the river, there was another community called Kolya community, and there was water sharing between these two communities. In one particular year, the water was taken out of turn by the Kolyas. So the Sakya Sangha, they made a decision to fight against the Kolyas, to which Buddha opposed. Buddha was a prince of the Sakya clan leader at that time, Shuddhodana. So he, as a prince, he protested against going for war because Sakya and Kolyas, they were all blood-related people. They were having marital relationships. And why should we fight against our own brothers? That was the argument of Buddha. But the Sakya Sangha did not accept. And the next day they were planning to go for war. But then Buddha opposed. He did not go for war. And the Sangha wanted to punish Buddha for that. And Buddha said, okay, if you want to punish, because the punishment was a capital punishment. They'll have to kill him or they'll have to throw him out of the country. And either way, they have to, the Sakya community has to answer the king, the monarch, the Kosala king. They have to answer. Both Sakya and Kolya came under the rulership of Kosala. So the Sakya clan was afraid to go against the king of Kosala. So they were in a fix whether to punish Buddha. If they punish Buddha, then they have to explain to the king, which they may not get sanctioned. So to this also, then Buddha came out with an explanation. He said, okay, I will go out of the country as on my own. So what do you call that? Parivraja. He took up Parivraja and he went out of the country on his own. So in that way, he neither took place in the war, he opposed war, and also he did not give the embarrassing situation to the Sangha. Because Sangha wanted to punish him, but they were not able to punish him because of the Kosala. So that is how Buddha took his decision to leave the country, and he had to go to the Parivraja. In the history, we learned that Buddha left his house, his wife and child without telling them. He abandoned his family. But that is not true. That is the wrong history. We understand, as per the Buddha and Dhamma book written by Babasaheb Dr. Ambedkar, the real history of Buddha, how he took up Parivraja, is very clearly given. And this is the history. So Buddha came, discussed this matter with Yashodhara. And Yashodhara also said, your decision is right, because you are protesting against an evil thing called war, that too against our own brothers. I'll support you, but I'll take care of the child, Rahul, and your parents. You can proceed with Parivraja. That is how it happened. It is not that Buddha left his family abandoned. So actually what we are taught is Buddha protested against the three things death, sickness, and aging which he saw suddenly. But that is not true. Buddha actually protested against animal sacrifice. He protested against the caste-based inequality, which was the Varna-based inequality, and he opposed war. And that is why he took up this Parivrata. He went to Magadha, then Bimbisara met him. Bimbisara offered half of his country, but Buddha refused. Buddha said this cannot be reformed by political power alone, because the people themselves believed that the four Varnas existed, and all these people, they accepted that they belong to the Shudra, and they accepted that as their fate. So that concept has to be changed. So it doesn't require a political revolution alone. It requires a social revolution also. So he wanted to continue in the social revolution. So he went and studied the Vedic culture which was existing at that time. He studied the Vedas, Upanishads, and then he studied the existing practice of animal sacrifice, the Vedic culture, all this, and he refused to accept it. Then he discovered something very new at that time. Because just imagine Buddha's period was 483 BC to somewhere in 500 BC. At that time, there was nothing like an organ called the brain was not discovered. But Buddha discovered that there is something called mind, there is something called thinking. So till then, people thought all the actions were as a result of the God's will. So they were told by the Aryans that everything was the act of God. Nothing can happen without the will of God. That's what people believed. But it was at that time that Buddha discovered that there is something called thinking process within our body itself. He discovered mind. So see, we all came to know about the existence of an organ called the brain in somewhere in 1200 AD, 1200 CE. But Buddha, he could imagine, he could discover that there is something called mind. The function of the brain itself was discovered. This was a discovery. So he discovered that all the activities of human being was not the will of God. It was the will of one's own mind. And this mind can be controlled, and the activities can be controlled. And whatever you think, that is what happens. So you become as you think. That is what he started preaching. And then the scientific basis of this mind was explained, and people started realizing the importance. And then he went and explained this concept to all the people. The rulers started listening. And here the rulers were the local people, the clans, because people lived in small clans at that time. They were all local people, and there was a leader. So each clan is called as a Gana, and there was a leader called Isha. So each Gana had a Isha, and these were local people, and they had a democratic way of selecting the leaders. But after the Aryan invasion, slowly what they did was to capture the leaders, because they took the leaders into their idea. How they achieved this? This was actually explained in a book called the Brahmins in the Tamil country by Professor N. Subramanian. He goes about describing how this conspiracy took place. It was very quite logical only. See what happened? The rulers, the local people, they were controlling the local population. But after 3 years, they have to give up that ruling power, and another person will be selected by democratic voting. That was existing 2000 years ago. This Aryans, they started spoiling the minds of the leaders. They said, you are a person who is born to rule. You have been created from the shoulders. You belong to the Kshatriya clan. So they started spoiling the mind. And these people, because it is for their own benefit, because after 3 years, if they have to give up that post of the ruler and another person comes, they may not agree. So, whereas if they implement this Aryan concept, they can have their own child to come into that place. So this was readily accepted by the local leaders, and that is how the leaders started falling into the trap of Aryan culture. And then they started implementing it on the people. They started doing yagnas. They started giving gifts to the Brahmins. They started celebrating the Brahmins. And so the culture, the entire Vedic culture was accepted in the people. So these rulers then were met by Buddha, and Buddha started explaining. He exposed this conspiracy. then he started explaining how the mind works and how it is not entirely based on God. So all these teachings of Buddha were readily accepted by the people, and all people started following. There was a huge social reform in the minds of the people. And after Buddha died, the same concept was being taught by the monks, and Buddha statues were built, and people were following Buddhism. So this huge social revolution, it reflected on the political revolution also. People became aware, the local leaders became aware, and there was a huge revolution. And what political revolution started in Magadha, it spread to the entire country, and the Mauryan Empire came. And it was during the Mauryan period, there was a conflict between Brahmanism and Buddhism. People accepted the reality, the logic behind it, and the benefits of Buddhism, and the Shudras became kings. All were equal under law. There was no birth-based discrimination. There was a system, equal, and everybody had to do all the works. So this lasted for 300 years during the Maurya period, and that was the golden era for the native people, the Shudras. But then again, as all good things come to an end, there was a counter-revolution. And this counter-revolution came in the form of Pushyamitra Shunga, who killed the great-grandson of Ashoka, Brihadras. Brihadras was killed, and it was took over by the Shunga. Then Shunga dynasty was established, and Shunga was a Brahmin. So again, he revived Brahminism. Brahminism resurfaced, and Buddhism started getting destroyed. And then followed by many other empires. And during the Gupta period, totally Buddhism was vanished. There was a programmed destruction of Buddhism. The bhikkhus were killed, vihars were demolished, or the vihars were converted to Hindu temples, and either Shiva or Vishnu was installed instead of Buddha statues. Buddhist texts were burnt, or they were thrown into rivers. Buddha statues were broken, or they were converted into Hindu idols, and the entire Buddhist culture was defamed, and the entire society started changing from Buddhism, and Brahminism was totally, slowly getting implemented into the minds of the people. This is when the Puranas came. All these Puranas, they were propagated just to change the concept of Buddhism from the minds of the people. Buddha statues were destroyed, and even now we are getting Buddha statues. We are getting excavations of Buddha statues, but there is a very important thing to see. All these Buddha statues have their heads cut off. It is not like a natural destruction of the statues. All these were vehemently cut. That means they were purposely destroyed. I can show you many statues, and you just have a look at the head. You see how neatly they have been chiseled away. It is as though murdering a person, neatly chopping off his head. So such was the vehemence against Buddha at that time. There were many statues. All the statues you can see, the heads being cut off. During the same period, that is the Buddha period, instead of Buddha, because Buddha was everywhere. Everywhere people followed Buddhism. Buddhist statues were there, Buddhist vihars were there. And it was at this time, they had to find an alternative to Buddha. And this is when Ganesha came. So you can actually find out, make an internet search on when Ganesha came. Ganesha emerged as a distinct deity in the 4th and 5th centuries during the Gupta period. And you know, Ganesha, Gana means in Sanskrit, Gana means it's a group, and Isha means it's a leader. It's a group of the Sakya clan leader, Buddha. That's what it means actually. That is why we see that most of the Buddhist countries, they have Vinayaka worship also. And Vinaya Petaka, that gives a synonym for Buddha in Amarakosa, Vinayaka. So there is a relationship between this Ganesha and Buddha, because they wanted to replace Buddha's image. And that is when Ganesha was introduced. And now what we see is totally different. And naturally, you see, under the Bodhi tree, obviously there should have been Buddha statues. But now, under all the Bodhi trees, we see there is a Ganesha statue. How it was possible? And then in Tamil Nadu, we also see there is a Muni. There is a god called Muni, particularly worshipped by the local people. And these Munis, they have, and I can show you examples in Salem. where it is a Buddha statue only. Only thing is the head has been removed and a different new head has been inserted, and that's why you can see that there is a slight turning of the head. You can see your picture on the left side. That is actually a Buddha statue. And now recently there was a case filed, and people have won the case, and it was proved by the archaeologists that it is a Buddha statue, but it is being worshipped as Muni, Sakya Muni. Sakya Muni, again, in other words, it is Buddha's representation. Same thing happens in Madurai also. Madurai, there is a famous temple called Pandi Muni, and that is also a Buddha statue. And if you go look at the statue, it is very obvious that it is Buddha's statue. Only thing is the head is being deformed. And like this, many statues get deformed. I can show you a few examples, illustrations. You know about the Naga's symbol was snake and Panchashil, because Nagas accepted Buddha's Panchashil. So they have this five-headed Naga. And below this five-headed Naga, there is Buddha in reclining pose. And that has taken this place now. And this is Srirangam in Trichy. Most of these Perumal temples, you can have these Buddha statues. The head is covered. They don't remove the crown, because obviously the Buddha statue will be evident. This has been extensively researched by a doctor. He's a surgeon, Professor K. Jamanadas, who has written a book on temples built on Buddha viharas all over India. Many important temples, they have been proved to be previously Buddha viharas, and mainly he gives evidence. He gives a lot of archaeological evidence regarding these things. Tirupati, Shabarimala, and then Kanchipuram, Srirangam, Puri Jagannath, and Shingari Mutt. All these were once Buddha vihars. And Tirupati also the same thing. If you remove the crown, probably you can see the Buddha's head. And in Shabarimala, you can see there are a lot of similarities. The mudra, with saying Tripitaka, and then Panchashil principle. People who visit Sabarimala, they follow this Panchashil. They don't drink, they don't tell lies, and all this. So the Panchashil, whatever it proposes, these people follow that as a rhythm, and then they attend this Sabarimala. And also they call Sabarimala Sasta, another name for Buddha. And we can also say Saranam. Saranam is the word used for Ayyappa, and Saranam is being used for Buddha also. A lot of similarities, and that's why they claim that as a Buddha vihara. And slowly, so what happened? The bhikkhus were destroyed, the vihars were destroyed or taken over. Then Vedas were introduced, Manudharma was introduced, and the kings, they started accepting Brahmanism, and with their monarchic dictatorship, they destroyed Buddhism. Again, this four Varna system was reintroduced into the society. Now, there are the options before the Buddhists, because all the people are Buddhists now. Now, it has been totally changed. The Buddhist monuments have been destroyed. Their culture has been totally changed, and they are trying to impose Brahmanism. Now, what do they do? They have these three options. One is they have to accept the Shudra status and follow Brahmanism. That means they have to accept it and become Shudras again, as before. Or they'll have to revolt against the Brahmanism and continue to practice Buddhism. Second option. Or they have to escape from the entire system, go back to the jungles, or they have to go out of this country itself. So these were the three options. And the people at that time, in different groups, they accepted all the three options. So I'll tell you how. There was a group of these Shudras who accepted Brahmanism. They accepted themselves as Shudras, and then they were admitted into the common living. This period was a period where the cities were redefined. People were taken into the cities. So the cities were now constructed with a place for the Brahmins called Agraharas, and then the place for the forts where the kings lived, and then the place for the Vaishya, the trading community, to live, and there was a place allotted for the Shudras who accepted Brahmanism, and they were included in the city. And this is how the cities were developed, and this is what the village structure that we see throughout India now. And at the same time, the other group which did not accept that, where I'm showing in the red arrow, they were not allowed inside the city, and they were living outside the city. So because they did not accept Brahminism, so they were either not willing to go to the cities, or they were not accepted into the cities. They lived outside the cities. So this group, which lived outside, they were called as these areas, these settlements were called as cheris. Cheris, the people where the people who followed Buddhism lived, because they refused to accept Brahminism, and they continued to live in the culture of Buddhism. This evidence we get from Ayodhidasa. Ayodhidasa, most of you will be knowing, very famous person in the Tamil country, who was a great scholar, great revolutionary. Even before the period of Baba Sahib Dr. Ambedkar, he started talking about the original history. So he was the first person, I can say, to discover this history, this hidden history, that the original Buddhists were forced into following of Brahminism, and that is why they stayed outside the cities and they secluded themselves away from the Brahmins. I can quote a few examples. The Ayodhidasa Pandit was running this magazine called Tamilan, and I got this information from the book written by Professor Jnana Aloysius. So he has given a good book on the entire work of Pandit Ayodhidasa. In 1908 itself, he mentions about this. There was a reformers organization meet in Chennai. There, one person named Sri Seshachari, he mentions in the meeting that the Brahmins cannot cross through a particular area, which is where the Panchamas, the Avarnas, are living. The area was called as Parayacheri, Parayacheri, and that means what I'm telling you is this place where the Cheri, the people, the Buddhist people lived. They lived not only as outcasts, but they themselves did not allow the Brahmins also to enter their place. This is what is evident in the Pandit Ayodhidasa's books. So they lived away from the Brahminical culture as a separate culture. They followed this Buddhist culture. And the same thing is written in Perumal Pillai's book on the history of Adi Dravidas. There also the same narration is there, where the Buddhists who lived outside of the Brahminical culture, they never allowed the Brahmins also to enter. In fact, what happens if a Brahmin by force enters their place, they were chased away, and the place, the footsteps of the Brahmins who entered the place of the Buddhists were washed with the cow dung, and that is how it was reported. And it was during this time the Britisher Ellis, he was collecting the Tamil literature, and once what happened, he got writing in the form of palm script, from one person called Kandasamy. Kandasamy is the grandfather of Pandit Ayodhidasa. Kandasamy was having this palm script, and Kandasamy was working under Harrington. So Ellis took this help of Harrington and took the books, the script from Kandasamy, and that is what is Tirukural. And so then after getting these scripts, then he discusses with the Brahmins who were teaching in Tamil. So he showed them this script, and he told them that I got this from Kandasamy. Then the Brahmins said, oh, Kandasamy is an outcast, and they were telling him that he is Avarna. Then Ellis called back Kandasamy, and he was asking him, what is this? Why you are called different Avarna? That Pandit Ayodhidasa writes in this article in Tamilan magazine in 1909 about this instance. He says, he reports Kandasamy as having told Ellis that we are different from them, we live separately, and it is due to some fight between our community people and them in the past, which he was not aware at that time. And we don't entertain Brahmins entering our places, and we also don't go to their places. This was the scenario at that time. So that is, so I've explained the two options. One is the Buddhists, the native people who accepted the Shudra status and went into the cities to be living along with the Hindus, and current day they are called as the OBCs. And those people who revolted and lived outside the city in a secluded place, a place of their own, with a Buddhist culture, that is called a Cheri, and they are the current day scheduled castes. And what about the third, the people who escaped and went back into the tribal culture? They continue as the scheduled tribes now, And there were some people who escaped away from India itself, and they went to the other countries and developed Buddhism in the foreign countries. So that was the fate. So now, by now, what happened? The culture changed back from the Buddhist culture which was existing in Mauryan Empire. Now it has changed to this Brahminical culture, where the Varna system was reintroduced: Brahmin, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudra, and there was now, apart from Shudras, there was one more group, that is the Buddhists. They were called Avarnas because they were not willing to go into the system. They were not accepting the caste-based superiority, so they were staying outside. It is casteless people. They were casteless. They were religionless. They stayed as Avarnas, also called as Panchamas, because they followed the Panchashila of Buddha. So this is the new scenario which developed in the society. But then at that time, the ruling class opposed. They made a lot of restrictions on the Buddhists who lived outside. Manu code was written. All the kings started following this Manu Dharma. Various restrictions on the Buddhists and the Shudras were made, even on the Shudras, because they were also the native people. No? So on the Shudras and the outcasts, the people who were living outside the cities, they were not permitted to own land or cattle. Buddhists were not allowed to live inside the cities. They were allowed to live only outside, and they were not allowed to wear dress, and even females were not allowed to wear their top dresses. They were not allowed to eat in plates. They were not allowed to take water from public places. And whenever they wanted to go and seek job for their living, they were given very menial jobs and very meager thing as their wages. Slowly, what happened? The Buddhists who lived outside the city, they were put into a lot of suffering, a lot of restrictions, and finally they lost all their belongings. They lost their cattle, they lost their lands, they lost their livelihood, and slowly they started changing their habit itself. And what happened? Buddhism was slowly destroyed from their minds itself. They started hiding their identity, because if they say Buddhist, then they had to face the violence of the other people. So they stopped calling themselves as Buddhists. They stopped telling their children. The next generation came without knowing that they were Buddhists. Slowly, Buddhists hid their history and Buddhists forgot their history. That is how they lost their identity. So Buddhism, that was once the state religion in Maurya period. You imagine, it was there everywhere. It was at this period that Buddhism came down from north to south during the Sangha period. The Sangha kings were in support of Mauryan Empire. And a lot of Sangha literature, Tamil literature, is evident to show that Buddhism spread during that time, and people were following Buddhism in Tamil Nadu also. So this is in summary the native people who were Nagas or Dravidas. They were living happily, because now it is evident that the Indus Valley civilization existed from 6000 BC itself. So nearly 4,000 to 4,500 years, these people lived happily as an agro-based, peace-loving people. And during Aryan invasion in 1500 BCE, the Varna system was introduced, Brahminism was introduced, and against this inequality, Buddha revolted, Buddhism came, and then there was a counter-revolution by Pushyamitra Shunga. There was a fight between Brahminism and Buddhism, and then Buddhists were shifted to either the OBC, who accepted as the Shudras, or who did not accept the Varnas. They stayed as Avarnas, and so thus 5 systems came. That is the 4 Varna system, and the 5th category of Avarnas came. So this is how Babasaheb Dr. Ambedkar concludes: the war between Brahminism and Buddhism created the depressed classes. And now we have, in the name of the God, there were the 4 Varnas, and then there was another group which did not bother about the God. So they were following the Buddhist culture. So this was about 400 AD. They formed as a separate group itself. That was following Gupta's period. This group emerged as a separate group, much away from the Varna system. But because of the continuous tyranny on them, continuous rejections, continuous discrimination, what happened? They slowly lost their livelihood. They slowly lost their identity. And who lived as Buddhists in 400 AD, away from the Varna system, slowly lost their identity. And how they became to be identified by 1400, another 1000 years, they became identified as people who were broken and who were depressed, who were living in slums. That was their identity. But by now, they themselves forgot and everybody forgot who they were. This status continued till the British arrived, and it was during the British period these depressed classes people started getting some education and works, jobs. Again, Pandit Ayodhyadas' works have to be mentioned here, because it was during this period in Chennai, in Tamil Nadu, he organized these depressed class people. He discovered, so he didn't do research on the archaeological sites, but he did research among the culture of the people and among the Tamil literature. And it was very obvious for him that the Buddhist culture was hidden among the people, the scheduled caste people here. So this he made evident, and he embraced Buddhism. He proposed to the all the Adi Dravidas to embrace Buddhism. He started his movement here. People and he started representing the people's problem to the British people. And there were movements in support of the Adi Dravidas. And Pandit Ayodhya made a huge representation to the British. And it was the British people who started giving jobs and food to the untouchables, who were till now, they were kept outside. They were given very menial jobs. They were not allowed to study. They were not allowed to wear proper dresses, not allowed to eat proper food. So all these restrictions slowly started disappearing during this period. And it was during this period, British brought in a lot of laws. The right to buy lands. Anybody can buy lands. Till then, the Shudras and the outcasts were banned from buying land. They cannot own land. And then female infanticide was banned. Bonded laborers was banned. And till then, Brahmins were not punished. So Pandit Ayodhya also mentions this, that there were two different punishments given to the Brahmins and non-Brahmins in Tamil Nadu at that time. And the non-Brahmins, the Shudras and the outcasts, they cannot even enter the courts. They have to stay away from the court. So whatever case, they have to tell it to somebody, and the other person will go and represent in the court, and they'll be punished. And the punishment also differs between the Brahmins and the non-Brahmins. This was changed, and the British period, they made all the punishment equal for Brahmins also. And then there was a practice among the Shudras that the Shudra girl has to live with the Brahmin for the first 7 days after marriage, and then only she has to go to her husband. So this practice was banned in 1819 by the British, and right to education for everyone was given. And then there was a practice in Shudras where the first male-born child had to be killed by throwing in the rivers. That's called Gangadan. This was banned. And then a right to sit on chair for Shudras was given in 1835. The Manu Code was banned. Baba Sahib Dr. Ambedkar burnt Manu, and Manu Code was banned by the British. Now, there was a need to represent to the British about the plight of the people. It was Baba Sahib Dr. Ambedkar who took up this issue. He had a dual responsibility. He had to educate the people about this, and then also he had to represent to the rulers. He did this perfectly. And during this war of independence, the Muslims and Sikhs were demanding separate political representation and powers. It was like during this period, the British people were contemplating about independence. And that time, the issues were raised regarding Muslims separate power, political power, Sikhs separate political power. At this time, Baba Sahib Dr. Ambedkar, he represented that separate political power have to be given for the depressed classes also. This was discussed in Roundtable Conference. I think you'll all be knowing. And Gandhi opposes. He says it will divide the Hindus, because the Muslims and Sikhs are getting representation based on their religion. But the depressed classes, the scheduled caste people, they cannot claim as a different religion because they come under Hindu. They are called as Harijans, the children of God. So that is how he is. But Baba Sahib Dr. Ambedkar was asking for a separate representation because he claimed these people as non-Hindus. He proved that they had a different culture itself, and they were not accepting the Brahminism. They were not accepting the caste system. They were Avarnas. So he wanted them to be a separate representation in the electoral powers. But then Gandhi opposed that they were all Hindus. So this Ambedkar replied, if Dalits were children of Hindu God, then why they were not allowed to take water from the Maharaj tank? If they were Hindus, then why they were beaten up when they tried to enter Kalaram temple? So this was the argument posed, and the British understood the point. So they understood that the Dalits were not Hindus, and their demand of separate political rights as Muslims or Sikhs or Anglo Christians is equally good, and they awarded the communal award. And Baba Sahib wins the argument. In 1932, we get the communal award granted by Ramsay MacDonald. Baba Sahib was hailed as a hero. People thought that the depressed classes will see some power, but unfortunately, Gandhi goes on fast into death to oppose the communal award. He didn't want this communal award to be implemented, and as a result, it was given up. The Pune Pact was signed, and in return, there was something called reservation was introduced. And for this reservation, a list had to be created, a list of people who fit into this category, who were the depressed classes. They were enumerated. So the 1911 census was taken by J.H. Hutton. That was actually taken into consideration. They wanted to see who are all these people who Baba Sahib Dr. Ambedkar claimed as non-Hindus. And there was a criteria given to identify them as non-Hindus. And based on these criteria, they were enlisted as a separate group. So these castes were brought under a separate schedule. So a list, that is what we call as a scheduled caste. A scheduled caste list was created. So it is nothing but the list of people who were not Hindus, and at the same time, they were not belonging to Islam or Christianity or Sikhism. That means they are of a different religion, but we don't know. It was at that time, this list was separately created. That is it, to say they were casteless, they were religionless people. So these people were brought into a list, and this is what is the scheduled caste list. And the criteria used to find out these people, they are the people who refuse to accept Brahmin supremacy. They are the people who refuse to go to Veda gurus for sermons. They refuse to accept Vedas. They refuse to worship Hindu gods, and so on. So these people were separate. This is when Baba Sahib Dr. Ambedkar declared that they are not Hindus. So definitely he said, though I was born as a Hindu, I'm not going to die as a Hindu. This was proclaimed in the Yola Conference in 1935. And later in 1936, he reiterated this in the Kalyan Conference in Mumbai. And subsequently, he embraced Buddhism in 1956, along with millions of people. We know this. So this great man had a vision, and we now know the history of Buddhism, how it evolved, how intricately it is related to the people of the scheduled caste, and in what way it is actually a cause and the effect. So we know now Buddhism is a very underlying feature behind the life of the scheduled caste people now. From October 14, that is when he embraced Buddhism, to December 6, he lived for a very short period, but he had a big dream of bringing about Buddhism among the scheduled caste, reviving Buddhism, because they were all Buddhists. He discovered that in his 20 years research from 1936, when he declared in the Yola Conference and the Kalyan Conference, he did research for 20 years, and in 1956, he embraced Buddhism, and he wanted all the scheduled caste people to embrace Buddhism and identify, restore their identity and live with dignity on par with any other religion. That was his dream, but after that, his dream was unfulfilled. And nowadays, we are paying tribute. Recently, we celebrated Dr. Ambedkar's birthday, and people celebrate birthdays by wearing his T-shirt, honoring him, garlanding his statues or garlanding his photos. But the principles have been forgotten. Baba Sahib Dr. Ambedkar says, I believe my people will sacrifice everything to establish Buddhism in India. This he said in 1956 when he was asked how in this old age he is going to revive Buddhism. He said, our people will do it. So this is what the message has to be taken from all the reformers who try to reform the caste system, who try to reform the life of untouchables. They have to start from where Dr. Ambedkar left. The Ambedkarites must understand this, because in a relay race, when a person comes running with and hands over the baton to the next person, the other person starts from that place only. He doesn't start all over again. Similarly, Baba Sahib Dr. Ambedkar has spent 20 years of research on what is the cause for untouchability, and he has come running all the way, and he is now handing over the exact solution in the hand. all the Ambedkarites have to start from that place instead of going and looking around the effects. So what I mentioned earlier, the effects and cause. So people are now looking only at the effects. They should also look at the cause. So the vision was to have an egalitarian society. And when do you get this egalitarian society? When everybody lives equally. See, there are divisions among the other religions also. You can have religions in Islam, you can have divisions in Christianity, and even in Buddhism, there are divisions, Hinayana, Mahayana. But all these are divisions. The division, there is a difference. Here, these are graded inequality. It is like somebody is superior, then somebody is below that, and somebody is below even that, and there is somebody totally outside. So this system has to change, because if you are going to talk about equality, you have to come out of this place because you are down. So only when you come to this parallel level, the normal baseline, then only you can start talking about the equality. That is why the untouchables who do not belong to the Hindu system, but they think that they belong to the Hindu system, they start quarreling here. So this is ultimately the cause for untouchability. Because you can see the cause is they don't belong to Hinduism, but the Hindus don't know that. The untouchables also don't know that. They think that they are Hindus. They're trying to get into the system, but these people don't know that they are not Hindus, but they don't want them to come into Hinduism. That is why this conflict goes on. Whenever they try to enter their temples, they are driven out. Whenever they try to marry their women, they are driven out. So this understanding is very important if at all you want to find out a solution for this. So we right now come back to the same slide. There is a suffering. The suffering is untouchability. It has been clearly defined. And we right now know the cause for the suffering because it was a fight between the Brahmanism and Buddhism. The Buddhists who do not know that they belong to a separate religion, they belong to a separate group itself. They think that they are Hindus. They are trying to identify with the Hindus, and that is where the conflict lies. That is the cause. And so, what is the solution? Naturally, they have to go back to their religion, that is embracing Buddhism. That is the solution prescribed. And now, when we implement that, the untouchability will come to an end in India. Now, the question is again, okay, so are we going to treat only the cause, not the symptoms? Because what the people really suffer with is not the Buddhism or Hinduism. What they are suffering with right now is illiteracy, poverty, lack of jobs, lack of political power. These are the main problems. Are we not going to address them? Then the question is, we have to address them. We have to treat the symptoms also. Then only it will relieve them of the present problem. But at the same time, we have to treat the cause also. Then only it will cure the disease. Otherwise, it is equal to bringing all this in a pot with a lot of holes, because it will not have any meaning unless you treat them together. So that is why any emancipation of the Dalit society in India must address the cause and the effects. So that's why Baba Sahib Dr. Ambedkar says, if you have decided to fight, because this education, economy, gathering a good job, gaining political power, that is everybody's fight. Everybody has to fight. That is by default, everybody has to do that. But if you have to fight, why fight from the wrong place? Because you don't belong to this place. You are all originally Buddhists. So go as a Buddhist and then start fighting. Then start getting yourself educated, get yourself improved in economy. So that is why, because as long as you stay inside a cage, if a cheetah makes noise inside a cage, everybody will be looking at it and they would like to take photographs. They will be seeing it happening. But once it comes out of the cage, then only people will realize the strength of the cheetah. So I would conclude here with this picture. This is very important because this will answer all the questions. As many as questions regarding the untouchability, this particular picture alone gives the answers. The one important question is why there is a fight between the untouchables and the Hindus, because this picture obviously tells that they don't belong to this system. They are away. Okay, then why the others are not fighting? Though there is a graded inequality here, why the Shudras are not fighting against the system? Why? Because they are being cushioned by the untouchables. If you ask me why this caste-based inequality exists, then I would say it is because of the untouchables. Because they are cushioning the caste burden. See, when they are here, the Shudras, who are naturally supposed to revolt against this caste-based inequality, they do not revolt. Why? Because they have somebody to control over at their bottom. This is the beautiful design of the caste system. It is a graded inequality where even though there are many people superior, you have somebody inferior. That is a psychological phenomena, and that is why this caste system is surviving. So if you don't want this caste system and the caste-based discrimination to survive, then what you have to do is first you have to remove this base. This is sitting on the base. The untouchables have to realize this and they have to come out of the system, and then only the other people will start realizing this graded inequality, and then these may turn around into a single egalitarian society. Thank you very much for a patient listening. Thank you, Ambedkar Caravan, for giving me this opportunity.
Dr. Rajvardhanan, that was a wonderful, wonderful historical presentation with the strategies to fight the caste system as well as the curse of untouchability. Thank you so much for this erudite presentation. We would have invited a few questions from the audiences, but we are short of time. But here is a question for you. As we know that the fundamental values of the Constitution of India, liberty, equality, and fraternity, as Baba Sahib Ambedkar said, that they are not derived from the French Revolution, but from his master, the Buddha.
Yeah.
And therefore, we need to really find a way to build this movement of revival of Buddhism, which is like the movement for bringing the constitutional values alive in our country. So as a Buddhist scholar and an Ambedkarite and a surgeon, what kind of a message you would like to give to the community, to the All India community, as to how we can move forward with this great vision of Baba Sahib Ambedkar, the vision of Prabuddha Bharat, and the vision of the Constitution of India itself? So what kind of a message, Doctor, would you like to give it to the people?
See, what we understood, because we have been working in the field for the last 5 years, and in a movement in Tamil Nadu, we have been analyzing the minds of the people. What we understand is the people are not aware of this historical background. So this is the concept given by Baba Sahib Ambedkar. Now we all know that Ambedkar was a great architect of the Indian Constitution. But regarding this social equality, what is the solution that he has proposed? In the book Path to Salvation, what he has proposed and why he has proposed, this is not being taken to the community level. So people have to be aware of this fact. Once they get aware, then naturally they'll start agitating in their minds, and then they'll start organizing.
So, Rajvardhan, the last question for you. Is there a kind of a movement in Tamil Nadu now that people, particularly the Ambedkarites, are moving towards Buddhism, and how vibrant is the movement?
Yeah, correct. So here there is a movement called Mass Movement for Transformation, the movement which I also belong. We are a group of mainly doctors and then various other professionals who have joined together. We have understood this concept of Baba Sahib Dr. Ambedkar, and we feel that once we implement this, then the caste-based inequality can be addressed effectively. And this movement is now reaching towards the people. We are trying to educate them. We are trying to put forth the facts before them. It is for them to decide. So we are not going to force them into anything. It is we are just presenting them the facts as they are, as per the evidence, with the available literature evidences. And people have started realizing.
So it's wonderful, wonderful mission, Dr. Rajvardhanan, and all the best wishes. We have to find a way to reach out to the people throughout India with this kind of a message that you have just given to the audiences. Thank you so much for joining Ambedkar Caravan. Do you want to have a last a few words?
Yeah, thank you very much, Mangesh. This was a great opportunity. And I think we have to address this caste system. Anybody, irrespective of caste, whoever is interested in empowering India must address this caste system. so that everybody feels equal. Everybody has that, as you said, the liberty, equality, and fraternity. So they must have that in their minds. They must be a proud citizen of India, and we all must unite and work towards betterment of India. And particularly after this COVID crisis, we have to bring our nation up again. And if this is at this moment, as the Prime Minister also has said, we have to fight united, irrespective of the caste and religions. And this is the opportunity for everybody to think. And having known the real history, now it is obvious that the untouchables are not untouchables because of their unclean jobs. They are not untouchables because of their illiteracy, not not untouchables because of their low morale or anything. It is obvious that they have been suppressed in the history due to a change in the belief system itself. So once you try to honor that, then we can, everybody can live in harmony, and the untouchables outlook itself will change.
Thank you so much, Rajvardhan, for joining Ambedkar Caravan meeting.